Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Celia Partridge. I'm Assistant Director, Partnerships and Mobility at Universities UK International. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon at what we hope will be a very interesting event for you all in the publication of our report on short-term mobility. It's my role just to give you a few housekeeping remarks before I hand over to Vivian Stern, the Director of Universities UK International, in a second. So welcome to our event. We have a great lineup of speakers and presenters for you today. In terms of housekeeping, just to make sure that we run smoothly on Zoom, we would just ask you if you could all keep your microphones and videos off at all times. The event is being recorded and you'll have had to sort of sign up to that as you've logged in, and will be uploaded afterwards to the UUKi's YouTube channel. You're welcome throughout the event to use a chat function to ask any questions, and we won't be taking any questions immediately following the presentations, but we'll have a collective Q&A session right at the end following the student panel. But do continue to add any questions as we go through into the chat, and we'll try and pick out as many of those as we can at the end. I think that's all from me for now. So the next thing I will do is hand over to Vivian Stern, the Director of Universities UK International, to say a few words of welcome. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Celia, and welcome everybody. Thank you for giving up a bit of your time to join us for the launch of this report. I think it's a really important report and absolutely the right moment. I'm pleased to say we're joined, I think, today by colleagues from all corners of the globe. We've got staff from UK universities who are involved in international affairs and studying abroad, but we've also got colleagues from partner organisations such as the DAAD in Germany and of course the British Council in the UK, and from international partner universities and embassies around the world. And altogether, I think we've had interest from over 400 people. I don't know whether everybody has managed to join us, but certainly there was obviously a lot of interest in this event. And the point is to give us an opportunity to talk through some of the findings of the report we're publishing today on short-term mobility, long-term impact. And this is the culmination of a research project which has spanned 4 years in this area, an area which we see as really quite important when thinking about how to make sure that the widest possible range of students from the widest possible range of backgrounds get access to international experiences. We all understand, I think, in this group, the value of study and placements abroad for our university students. But we also know that some of the traditional models, particularly year-long mobility experiences, just seem to be inaccessible to some students. Increasingly, in the last few years, we've seen universities offering a more diverse range of opportunities for students, including shorter international experiences of between a week or 2 months, something which creates a different sort of opportunity for students who, for many reasons, may feel that spending a year away simply isn't possible for them. From previous reports and studies that we've done in UUKi and that others have done, we know that short-term mobility is important because we've seen evidence that it's more accessible for students who can't fit a longer period of study abroad into their degree, or who have personal or family commitments, or for whom the thought of spending such a long time abroad without appropriate financial support just seems financially impossible. But we didn't know very much about the what sits underneath that sort of high-level understanding of value. So, for example, we'd got pretty good anecdotal evidence that students were gaining key skills from short-term mobility experiences, and particularly in terms of personal development, resilience, confidence, and openness to future international opportunities. And we also, of course, knew that participation in these experiences was high, and particularly from some of those groups that we wanted to make sure that we increasingly cater for in the outward mobility experiences that universities are creating. But we wanted to dig a little bit deeper, and that's the point of the study that we're presenting today. Who's participating in these sorts of short-term mobility experiences? How does it help to overcome barriers to study abroad? Why are these things valuable? And I think it's particularly important to understand the benefits of short-term mobility now at this point, not only because universities are putting more emphasis on these sorts of opportunities and therefore investing more of their time and effort, and so we need to know whether that's a good investment, whether there are lessons that we can learn from the experiences of some universities that will help others move forward in a good way in this space. But also because in the UK, we're at a point where the government has launched a new funding programme, the Turing Scheme, which has right at the heart of its design a commitment to try to widen participation in international experiences, including by funding mobility with shorter periods. It will fund mobility from any more than 4 weeks or more. And I think that is quite a significant shift. And I think we think that it's incumbent on us to try and gather evidence of the impact of these sorts of shorter periods of mobility in order to encourage government to continue funding these sorts of experiences, and also to provide some evidence of the impact that they can have. So in today's event, you're going to hear not only from some of the universities who have developed programs that support short-term mobility, but also later on from a panel of students who can talk about what the experience was like from their first person perspective. Before we do that, I'm going to pass over to my colleague, Emily Sinclair, who's going to talk through the findings of the report. But before we do that, I would like to give the microphone to our two funders for this project, the British Council. We're going to hear in a second from Michael Peake, who's who's responsible for education research at the British Council, and from James Richardson of the Northern Consortium. And he is Director of Global Development and Partnerships at Sheffield Hallam University. And they're going to say a few words about why they felt this was an important project to fund. So that's it from me. I'm going to pass over now to Michael.
Thanks, Vivian, and thanks for inviting us to be part of this study. It was, like you say, it was a couple of years ago. It's certainly over 18 months ago that the British Council was talking with Universities UK International about their idea to do this study, and I'm delighted that back then we were able to support and working alongside Northern Consortium to help to get this off the ground. So thank you for that opportunity, and a big congratulations to UUKi and the whole team there, Vivian and Celia, but also Katie Allenton, who was a big part of this project as well. Just to echo some of the things that Vivian was saying, we know from across the breadth of the work the British Council does, we know how the importance of mobility and exchange, particularly for young people, and that it can have an impact at different levels. It has an impact on the young people who have these experiences, and also at an institutional level there's an impact, but of course at a national level too. There's a real benefit to the UK in supporting young people to have international experiences. So I think that in that context, this report is a very important and very timely publication of it, and very proud to have been part of it. It's only through this type of international exchange and mobility it can help to make the UK more connected and more trusted in a more connected and trusting world, and that's so that's why we wanted to be part of this study. So that's all I'll say. Congratulations again to Universities UK International for publishing this, and I'll hand over to James from Northern Consortium.
Thank you very much, Michael and Vivian, for the introduction. So yeah, my day job is Director of Global Development and Partnerships at Sheffield Hallam, but I'm also a trustee of a charity called Northern Consortium. It was a charity founded in 1987 to facilitate access to international education. And that's why we were pleased to partner with Universities UK International for this research, which has led to this report, because this is all about the advancement of education, particularly international education, which is our core charitable objective, the advancement of education for all. We pursue that mostly through activities of NC UK, which many people may have heard of. It's a subsidiary of the charity, and it runs qualifications across the world. So there's 100 centres in over 30 countries across 5 continents, providing quite often pathway programmes that lead to universities all around the world, not just in the UK. It's important to mention UUKi because that generates the income for the charity, for Northern Consortium, which we then are able to distribute as awards, as scholarships, and in this case, for the first time, funding for primary research that supports access to international higher education. This was the largest award that we've made for any single event, and we're delighted in the outcome and the report itself. It is evident from the report that short-term mobility is more attractive to students from backgrounds that may not have traditionally considered longer-term mobility. And at a university like my own, like Sheffield Hallam in the UK, where we actually have the highest number of students from underrepresented backgrounds, the prospect of studying abroad for a year or for a semester was just a non-starter. We had very low participation rates. The fact that as a result of this research and this report, we now have more evidence that short-term mobility has such a significant long-term impact should be taken as a call to arms for all our universities to provide and support short-term mobility opportunities to widen access to international higher education for all. I think that's enough from me. I'm sure people would like to hear more about the research and the report itself. So I'll hand back over to Emily.
Great. Thank you very much to Michael and to James for those great words about the report and supporting the project. Bear with me, I'm going to just share my screen. Sorry. Right. Great. So my name is Emily Sinclair, and I'm the Outward Mobility Lead at Universities UK. And I'm going to give a short overview of the report and information about the research and some of the key findings. But first, we would like to thank the funders, the British Council and Northern Consortium for supporting the project steering group and participating students at universities. So through listening to the student voice from surveys and focus groups and supported by university case studies of short-term mobility activities, the report details motivations of students to undertake short-term mobility. It reviews impacts and benefits of short-term mobility and also barriers to participating in study and placements abroad. It makes recommendations for universities when developing and planning short-term mobility activities and implementing strategies and policies for short-term mobility. So first of all, I think it's useful to define short-term mobility. So this is typically a study abroad activity, which is less than a term or semester and certainly less than a year. So it's usually between 1 week and 2 months. And for the purposes of this research and report, we're focusing on mobility of less than 4 weeks. So from the case study, it is clear that types of programs for study short-term mobility are many and varied. But a common factor is that they tend to be very intensive and immersive and always very structured international experiences to fit a lot of activities into a short time away. They are very well planned in terms of logistics and preparing students before they go and supporting students during the time away. They also build up trusted partnerships with universities and organisations which facilitate this type of mobility. A popular model for short-term mobility are summer schools, often held by prestigious international partners. These are very well managed, involving local students with international students and creating a very supportive environment. A lot of short-term mobility will involve group visits of students from maybe 15 upwards with accompanying staff. And these may be organised and managed from a department at faculty level. So with a very strong disciplinary focus, but often these will reach out to other departments across the university to bring in students from other disciplines, which is great for the students to get to know students from other areas of the university before they go. But also it sort of creates a pool of resource with further academics and support personnel getting involved in these programs, which helps to sustain them in the future. A lot of short-term mobility focuses around employment, entrepreneurship, visits to industry, internships, and involving students in sort of group projects, group presentations and companies. And there's also volunteering and teaching, which is very popular as well, allowing students to engage in local communities and organisations doing local projects. So why look at short-term mobility now? Well, I think it's clear that Vivian explained some of the research that UUKi had done previously, and how we discovered in like 2019 report that short-term mobility has been increasing over the last few years and now accounts for sort of 21% of all reported mobilities. So with this rise in short-term mobility, it's really important to understand the benefits of it to students, the impact, participation patterns, and once we identify these and share good practice across the sector, we can develop these experiences further. It's also clear, as has been mentioned previously, that this type of mobility is really accessible to students from disadvantaged groups. And as that's particularly topical now with the Turing scheme, which has at its heart the desire to level up and again widen access to disadvantaged groups through providing scholarships for mobilities of less than 4 weeks. So looking at the methodology for the research report, this is based on information obtained through student focus groups and student surveys, along with institutional data and perspectives through case studies. So of 749 participants, 626 had undertaken short-term mobility. The aims of the focus groups were to better understand what attracts students to short-term mobility programs and to understand their impact. But we also talked to students who hadn't participated in short-term mobility to understand those barriers as well. We invited universities to get involved at the start of the project and got a very good response from a mixed and varied range of institutions. The case studies that you'll see in the report also show the very diverse models of short-term mobility which universities are offering. And these case studies offer valuable insights into managing and running these activities. So the report goes into length what attracts students to undertaking short-term mobility. So, for example, results from the survey show that 97% of students should experience something new and sort of make the most of the opportunities that universities offer in this area. 92% wanted to improve their cultural awareness. 87% understand how these experiences will get them out of their comfort zone and improve their confidence. A good number wanted to broaden knowledge of their academic subject, seeing it as an opportunity to enhance, to enrich their degree, but also to try something new. Students also wanted to develop professional networks and meet new people. And finally, 80% of the students wanted to improve their employment prospects, again, understanding that this will set them apart and it will certainly have the edge on their CV. From the focus groups, students talked about the shared experience of short-term mobility, going abroad in a group, and the security that offers, which is really nice to hear. Again, the opportunity to study something new, and also to gain insights into working abroad, international placements. And again, you know, hearing from students that they appreciate the opportunities that universities offer in this area and that they can do this alongside their degrees. And many students commented that they had researched what universities offered in this space before applying to the university. The research also sought to get a better understanding of the importance of duration. And the report shows that short-term mobility is seen as immersive and intensive. And in that way, it is easier for students to commit to. Some degree courses, many degree courses, don't allow a longer period abroad. It may be difficult to fit a term or a semester in, or a year abroad. So to be able to go away in the summer, or even within the course on a short visit, is really, really good for students. Also, many students have family commitments. They may be carers. They also have to work alongside their degree. So again, a shorter amount of time is absolutely key to be able to go abroad. But overall, this shorter amount of time that short-term mobility offers is less daunting, and especially for students who may not have travelled abroad before or not without their family, it feels much more accessible. So the report also gives a lot of detailed findings around the impact of short-term mobility. Student reported significant personal developments such as increased confidence, adaptability, empathy, intercultural understanding. All students felt it would impact employment prospects positively and make their CV stand out. The majority of students commented that they had improved such skills as teamworking, communication skills, intercultural and interpersonal skills. Students also talked about the academic impact, broadening their understanding of their degree, increasing their confidence in academic ability, and really extending knowledge around their degree subject. And what's also really nice to see is students who have participated in this type of activity then want to engage back on the home campus in international activities with international students, be buddies to international exchange students, and generally get involved more with internationalization at home activities. The report also notes the importance of support for students. Again, this is really key. So financial support is right up there for short-term visits, and it was very important to most students. But students highlighted the need for more transparency and clarity around costs, how much these visits are going to cost, but also what funding is available and what the eligibility criteria would be for that funding. Support ahead of the mobility was highlighted as important, such as pre-departure information, meeting students who you'll be going away with, meeting the course, the group leaders, but also learning basic language skills. So students really feel that that type of support is useful. Students also wanted to be sure that they could access mental health support while abroad, and also there were concerns about what support there would be if an emergency or a crisis happened. From the research, the report is able to report on barriers, such as affordability. Again, this is key here. How much will it all cost? So 41% of students were concerned about cost. But also fear of the unknown is up there. Doing something so new, how it will all work. And so in that way, we see the importance of buddy systems and other supportive sort of frameworks during those experiences abroad. Missing friends and family also comes up as a barrier. Again, many students may not have travelled abroad before and will feel quite daunted to go away and leave their supported network of friends and family. So moving on now to a little bit around the case studies. So we have some fantastic case studies in the report from 16 universities. We'd like to thank again for their work on those case studies, and we're lucky enough to have them in this report. The case studies show a varied and diverse range of short-term mobility programmes. They are beautifully presented and packed with information about programmes, which is really, really useful for universities wanting to further develop them or start new programmes. The case studies talk about where programmes sit in the institution, whether it's central or faculty-led, how they came about, how they're supported, how programmes can be sustained, how partnerships work, the importance of measuring success and the many different ways that you can do this, and also ensuring that success is widely shared in the institution. So finally, having listened to the student voice, and our project universities, the report has many recommendations. So again, firstly, a key recommendation is around providing financial support, grants, scholarships, and being transparent about costs, getting institutional buy-in, making it sort of clear that these sort of programs can be a recruitment tool for universities, and the importance of sharing student feedback around impact, and measuring success, and listening to the student voice, using the student voice to full effect, really. This type of mobility needs to be well organised and well supported, giving good preparation to students who are due to go. And plenty of time needs to be allowed to develop such programmes. Trust needs to be built with partners, logistics, destination, ensuring student and staff safety. There's a lot to think about for this short-term mobility. And there's lots of tips in the case studies which can help institutions with that. Further recommendations direct universities to consider undertaking more research of their own institution in order to understand what pockets of activity are happening around the university. And this could be at school level, faculty-led, internships, undergraduate research placements in science schools. That there will be a lot of activity going on. And it's important to have a record of these in one place so that they can be reported on, and they can be reported to HESA, so that we can build up a good picture of what is happening across the UK. And finally, again, the importance of having additional funding for these type of programs. So final thanks again to our funders, the project steering group, and all participants in the project which enabled it to happen. We are now going to show you a short video of 4 students talking about their experiences of short-term mobility, which I hope you will enjoy.
What you learn isn't just academics, it's learning about people, learning about places, learning languages, experiencing new cultures, new foods, new festivals, and all the while it's just so much fun.
I think it becomes really easy to make friends, because at the end of the day all the other students are there to connect with one another as well, so you are definitely not there alone.
So the key skills that I learned as a result of this opportunity were confidence and working in a group, working with students from all different backgrounds doing all kinds of different degrees.
And if you're looking for more academic point of view, on your CV it will look great because it will make you stand out from the crowd, and it's something that everyone would love. Some of the key skills that I gained there were my teamwork and communication skills, as we were working in groups to complete projects. And these groups consisted of people from all over the world.
I have to say that especially afterwards I could tell that my confidence was quite boosted. In a healthy way, I felt like I could connect with people a bit more.
I quite enjoyed that it was short and in summer, because it meant I could come back to Sheffield and start where I'd left off. My studies weren't interrupted and I could just spend the year learning with my friends I'd made in first year.
It was also great to have the costs taken care of. I wouldn't have been able to afford a trip like this otherwise.
Great. I hope you all enjoyed that, and thank you very much to the students who participated in the video. So we're going to move on now to the next session, and I'd like to welcome 3 members of staff from universities. We have Professor Bob Gilmore, International Mobility Lead at Glasgow Caledonian University, Eduardo Lees, Global Opportunities Manager at Goldsmiths, and Stephen Williams, Director of NTU Global from Nottingham Trent University, and they're going to talk through their particular short-term mobility programs.
Hopefully, Emily, you can confirm that you can see the screen and you can hear me. I'm just putting it on to presentation mode.
I can hear you. Yes, I can see your screen.
Great.
Yeah, that's
Thanks.
fine. Yep.
Thank you very much for the opportunity of presenting here today. I have to commend the sponsors and UUKi for preparing this report. Fantastic report, lots of details. What I'm going to do in the next 7 minutes is share with you our award-winning case study that focuses on short-term mobility, and it was with Glasgow Caledonian University, Lahti University of Applied Sciences, Finland, the Hague University of Applied Sciences in the Netherlands, and also Construction Area Scotland Limited, who were our industrial partner. And it's not moving forward for some reason. I'm going to go to the next slide. Yeah, there we go. So I think the first thing to say about our initiative was that we would not have been able to run it as successfully had it not been for strategic partnership funding from Erasmus+. It was funded over 300,000 or nearly 300,000 euros for about 3 years. It was industry informed, and it focuses on quite a lot of activities, a whole range of different types of activities that were interdisciplinary in nature and involved multicultural teams. And one of the great things about it was it attracted and it made it less daunting to students who came from a widening participation background, because they were able to go away to a structured programme and have the support of some of their peers, but also staff there as well. And the key thing that I'm going to be speaking about is our 10-day intensive study period that took place in Scotland, Finland and Netherlands over the 3 years. I think the first question that I'd like to answer is, why did PEATS develop? Well, it really developed only because of the funding that was provided through Erasmus+ for staff mobility. And that's one of the areas I think is so important in trying to support the ambassadors who will look after our students and encourage our students to take part in these initiatives, because not many of our students, first of all, believe that they could do it, or secondly, have the confidence to do it. So having staff there that are able to support that, give them appropriate advice is fantastic. And you can see the sort of wide diversity of types of people and experiences that we bring to such a diverse and interesting, but also fun initiative. The second question is, how did PEATS develop? Well, although I've put down here through creativity, endeavour and continuous enhancement, it was an awful lot of hard work. And I guess through this annual implementation cycle, or really the annual collaboration cycle, highlighting the management meetings, intellectual outputs, the learning, teaching and training activities, it's not just the 10-day intensive study period that we're dealing with. There's an awful lot of background work that goes into it. But having a sort of cycle that's planned out fairly clearly enables you to then focus on the delivery of something that you hope is going to be transformational in the future for the participants of it. So this is just a list of photographs here highlighting the range of different types of activities undertaken during our intensive study periods. The first one, top left, was industry visits, taking the students to the Hollow Mountain Cruachan and Pump Storage Scheme, so hydroelectric power. The second one is where the students are filling the foundations with concrete, pouring the concrete for these renewable wind energy turbines, 5 metres tall. And these are sorts of activities that you wouldn't normally expect to get in one university, let alone you know, all of the many universities. It's not all about hard work. There's also about the cultural experiences, whether it's ceilidh dancing or whether it's actually cooking food, salmon by the campfire in Finland. So it's a mix of different types of activities to focus on the development of a range of different types of attributes and skill sets for these students. And then final year, we were in the Netherlands, and you can see some of the students working to their building pumps so that they could then pump out a flooded area. The final photograph here is a really interesting one. One of our students from the Netherlands. She came along in the first year of PEATS. She had some individual challenges and indeed wished to leave the programme. We managed to support her through the first few days, and she enjoyed it so much, she developed so much that she came back the following year as a mentor to further students. And then in the final year, she came back and wanted to share her story on the impact of PEATS, the overall benefits that she'd had from undertaking that short-term mobility activity. Like any good academic, you're obviously interested in continuous monitoring, evaluation and enhancement. And it's not just the students, it's also the staff that we're looking at monitoring and enhancing as well. So we had self-reflective questionnaires before and after with an app that measured their intercultural competencies. We had self-reflective reports from the staff, but we also had independent annual external evaluation. And all of that together helped us gain a great understanding of what we were doing right and maybe what we could do better for each of the annual cycles. And I've included one of the student comments here, the best experience I've ever had. And I did have to question whether or not it could have been the best experience I've had, but speaking to the person later on, they did reassure me it was the best experience they ever had. One of the good things about that evaluation and monitoring is it provides a lot of data for us to be able to really explore the reach, the value and the impacts of such short-term mobilities. And I just want to highlight, it looks a kind of complicated diagram, but I want to highlight first of all, you know, where we went from in terms of the impacts, producing transferable outputs and outcomes like the ISP, the model, the summer school model, the app for benchmarking international competence, how that enhanced student expertise through the competence app or collaborating with 14 nationalities, or developing professional and interpersonal skills, technical skills, also improving student performance. And obviously we cannot claim pure causation through just this one activity, but many of the students had much improved grades and they had very good employability statistics as well. The thing that we underestimated in our activities was the enhanced staff experience and expertise and professionalism, whether it's through enhancing professional qualifications, publications, grant applications, some of which have been successful. We've had another €300,000 for an associated or similar type of project. And the other skills that you can learn through working with this type of activity. And I think tying it all together, it's how do you demonstrate, how do you illustrate to the senior management of your institution that you're doing something that's really worthwhile, not just for the benefits of the students, but also the benefits of the staff. Well, you can link it to the improving KPIs, whether it's NSS, teaching excellence, employability, or some other KPI. With PEATS, we had new equipment that was funded. And this is the one I think our principal really loved, the performance in the major events and awards. Well, it's the Scottish Green Energy Awards, Going Global 2019, the prestigious Collaborative Award for Teaching Excellence that we achieved 2019, or Best Practice Case Study. So in summary, our team created a range of flexible, innovative and award-winning learning environments, culminating in a 10-day study trip. And these opportunities provided students to be able to experience a range of different types of activities to stretch themselves and develop in a whole range of different ways, and develop and enhance some of the skills and attributes through transformational experiences. And I emphasize again, it's not just for the students, but it's also for the staff as well. I would urge anyone involved in any type of structured study visit to ensure that you scrutinise and map the reach, the value and impacts of your activities so that you can demonstrate the wider value of this to the institution and hopefully further support it. Do not underestimate the benefits of the students, staff and institutions. There's loads of benefits out there, but it's about getting these wee key, the golden nuggets, and sharing them with the team, the students, to encourage more students to go on this. And I think the bottom line that I'd like to highlight is this would not have been half as successful if it wasn't for the Erasmus Plus funding. And I really hope that through the review of the touring activity that they're going to look at providing funding supported with evidence such as this, and evidence from this fantastic report that we're looking at today, that will support not just shorter study visits of less than 4 weeks, but also staff study visits as well. On that note, I'd like to thank you very much for your attention. I'm going to try and stop sharing the screen, and I'm going to hand over to one of my co-presenters, Ed Lees from UCL, who's going to speak about his subject.
Hi, everybody. Hope you can see me and see my screen. Thank you, Bob. Thanks for the introduction. And thanks very much to Universities UK, British Council and Northern Consortium for this fantastic report. It's really fantastic to see the impact and to be part of the research as well. Hi, I'm Eduardo Lees. I'm the Global Opportunities Manager at Goldsmiths, University of London. And yeah, for the next kind of few minutes, I'm just going to introduce our Go Abroad programme, which supports our students to study and work abroad over the summer for between 1 week and 2 months. Next slide. So back in 2017, me and the team at Goldsmiths had a challenge of how to increase and wider participation in study and work abroad. We'd identified a number of barriers, many of which Emily talked about, which were pulled out in the report. So cost, both of going abroad and kind of lack of funding, academic requirements that were restricting our students from going abroad as part of their degree, and kind of linked to that, I guess, most of our international activity have been funded by Erasmus for traineeships or study abroad, which are fantastic opportunities, but there was a minimum duration of 2 months, which we felt, maybe changing, reducing the duration, making more flexible durations and more flexible timings might make international experience more accessible. We also wanted to diversify the opportunities that we offer to our students, and kind of open up different countries, different kinds of placements as well. There also at Goldsmiths, we don't have a languages department. We don't have many compulsory study abroad placements as part of a degree. And there wasn't a huge student culture at that time of kind of thinking about international experience as part of studies. We wanted to change the conversation around that and kind of create some excitement. One thing that was we had to bear in mind was that we were a very small team, and we weren't able to necessarily organise centrally created opportunities. So we had to think a bit about that, how we could work around that as well. There were some opportunities at the time. It was the Universities UK International had released their Stand Out campaign, which was encouraging more outward mobility. Our institutional strategies had a focus on employability and developing global citizens. And Santander universities we've been working with were looking to support more outward mobility, which was an objective we felt we could support with as well. Our response was to create our Go Abroad programme. This is bursary funded, so students find their own short-term placement. They can choose between 1 week and up to 2 months. Find an organisation, it must be with an organisation and have a structured programme of activity, and must be outside of the UK, obviously, and be relevant to their degree and career. We kind of provided advice and guidance in terms of website links and kind of partner university opportunities, encouraged students to talk to the departments to find opportunities as well. And then they applied to us and we provided the funding. And a huge thank you here to Santander universities who have been with us from the beginning of this programme and supported with the funding, without which we couldn't really have made it happen. So any student can apply for up to £500, and that funding comes from Goldsmiths. Or if they meet our widening participation criteria, then students can apply for up to £1,500, and that funding comes from Santander universities. And that funding has really transformed things for the students. The model is quite flexible, and actually the good format of the model was that last year, when we couldn't send students abroad because of coronavirus, we were able to kind of flip it to support virtual activities, so virtual summer schools, online language learning, and remote internships as well. We're really delighted with the outcome of this programme. We had over 200 applications over the last 3 years. We've funded 85 students, so 65 in person and 30 virtually, and 52% of those have been from a widening participation background. We've managed to kind of expand the number of countries that we can support students to send to, so over 32 countries across 5 continents, and lots of different kinds of activities. It's also given us an opportunity to see what students are interested in. So summer schools and language schools, language courses are really popular, and we've also supported work abroad, including some degree work placements, which has opened up opportunities within some degrees that we hadn't been able to support before. So for example, our design department, we can now kind of align with their work placement to support international work placements. In 2018-19, before coronavirus, we saw a 90% increase in students gaining international experience, and a large part was down to this programme. And excitingly, we also saw applications from across all of our departments, where previously we some of those departments students hadn't been able to apply for opportunities. In terms of the impact on the participants themselves, we're also really chuffed with this. So 91% of students reported they benefited personally, 78% of students reported benefiting academically, and when you include partially benefiting, it went up to 99%, so there was a benefit across all students there. And 75% of students benefited professionally, again going up to 95% when you included partially benefited. Some of the skills that came and the kind of benefits that came out of the case studies were improved employability skills, confidence, building networks around the world, a growing understanding of other countries and cultures, and foreign language skills as well. And one thing that's come out, which we've talked about already on this during this session, is that funding is critical. Only 3% of students would definitely have participated in their opportunity without a grant. Just some feedback from students, which I'll leave you to have a look at briefly. So Lauren, the first student, has a really great story that she was part of our pilot program in 2018 and funded by Santander to go to Greece for a month. She then applied to us a year later to do an Erasmus traineeship in Greece, again with a new organisation. And this year she joined us for a promotional talk, phoning in from Spain, where she's now teaching English, but also still volunteering with an organisation in Greece, where she's volunteering remotely with refugees. So that shows the impact of that initial mobility, kind of leading to a career of international activity. Malika, the second student, also had a really positive virtual internship last year, and we're delighted to have her as part of our team over the summer, working with us to look at how we can widen participation even further, which is fantastic. A few key considerations to think about when delivering a program like this. It was really important for us to kind of align strategically and pilot, and then evaluate, and then kind of show the impact to kind of institutional leads and funding partners. It is a kind of lighter touch program, but we still had to have an element of risk management to ensure kind of health and safety of students. So the placement had to be with an organisation. There had to be emergency contact. All students had to have insurance cover in place, and we delivered a pre-departure briefing for all students as well, with students completing a risk assessment or a home working assessment if it was virtual, and then we check in to see how students are getting on as well. Spread the word. We worked with academic departments, student news, careers to promote these opportunities. One thing that we did that made a real difference was to make case studies compulsory, as then we've been able to collect some really fantastic student stories. And finding placements to kind of give to students, to suggest to students, has been really important. For example, summer schools, that's really increased application numbers. Just a few final reflections from me. I think our experience at Goldsmiths of this short-term Go Abroad programme has reflected the kind of results of the report. It has increased and widened participation at Goldsmiths. It helped us to diversify our international offer. There's been a clear benefit to the students who have participated. And it's really benefited us as an institution as well. Obviously, those students come back and take part in daily life and spread the word, but also it's helped us to build wider and stronger partnerships with our exchange partners and collaborations, for example, with Santander universities, and strengthen those relationships as well. 3 things to consider. Funding is critical. Students would not be able to go abroad without funding, and I can't say again thanks enough to Santander universities for supporting with that, but other funding opportunities is really important and makes a difference. Providing specific opportunities does increase engagement, and I would really kind of emphasize the need for accessible placements. placements that are affordable, if there are work placements that can be paid, if there are placements that can put in place additional support requirements for students, for example, around mental health or disabilities. These will all help to widen participation. Thanks very much for listening. Do get in touch if you have any questions. Just a quick thank you to UUKi, British Council Northern Consortium again for the report, Santander Universities for the funding, to all of the students who have taken part, and to the Goldsmiths Global Opportunities team. Big shout out to Charlie, Jack and Shannon, and to Tom, who's left us but who was there from the beginning as well. Thanks very much for listening, and I think I'm going to hand over to Stephen now. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and greetings from Nottingham Trent University. It's highly appropriate to be giving this presentation to you today on the 5th anniversary of the day we all woke up to realise that the UK had chosen to leave the European Union. So you'll see the words Brexit, COVID and Turing appearing in this presentation. That's a bit of a health warning before we begin. So moving on, if my presentation will move. Sorry about the delay. So what did we do for this European Creative and Smart Cities Challenge? Well, we set our students the challenge of researching how cities and universities can work together to support creativity and innovation. And the way we asked them to do that was to travel around Europe by train for 8 days, exploring various case studies of best practice in smart cities and creative cities, with a view to understanding how Nottingham could enhance its status as a smart and creative city. In line with the UUKi report findings, we recognised the critical importance of pre-departure. So as well as the standard logistics, health and safety and intercultural briefings, we gave our students a compulsory full-day introduction to all of the smart and creative assets that Nottingham had to offer, including our creative quarter and a life sciences business incubator, the largest one in Europe, run by the 2 universities in the city. We then sent 100 students along with 12 academic mentors on trains across Europe. These were in interdisciplinary teams, and the objective was to visit 2 of Nottingham's twin cities, that's Karlsruhe in Germany and Timișoara in Romania. But on the way, they had to visit at least one other creative and smart city in the countries leading to Germany and Romania. We also sent 8 media students with them to film the challenge, and this was so that we could promote future study abroad opportunities in an authentic way through the student voice, which we just heard about in previous presentations as being so important. And we also wanted to create this connection to our city leaders for our students. So we also sent the Chief Executive of Nottingham City Council on the trip. He visited both Karlsruhe and Timișoara, although between us, he did fly and not take the train. And he also hosted a showcase event in Nottingham for the students when they returned to the UK. So in terms of what we wanted to achieve, I guess at the forefront of our mind was the levelling up agenda. We wanted to give all of our students, regardless of their background, equal access to international opportunities. That was absolutely the key thing. NTU, for those who don't know us, has the 2nd highest number of students from low participation neighbourhoods in the UK, and 35% of our students come from households with a combined income of £25,000 or less. So giving students access to international opportunities was absolutely key. We also wanted to provide some economic benefit for the city, not just academic benefit for our students and staff. So we entered into a civic engagement arrangement with 2 of Nottingham's twin cities, as I mentioned, Karlsruhe and Timișoara. And given that Brexit at one point was due to happen on the penultimate day of our challenge, so when our students are out in Karlsruhe and Timișoara, we wanted to create lifelong friendships for our students, but also academic contacts for our staff. and also, of course, business and civic partnerships for our city. So in terms of trying to achieve this, what do we do? So we set ourselves a target of recruiting 50% of the students from widening participation backgrounds. And of course, to do that, we needed to look at removing barriers, especially financial barriers. So we covered the costs of accommodation and travel for all students. And for our widening participation students, we gave them an additional £150 bursary to cover some of their living costs whilst they were on the trip. We also offered to pay for passports for any students who'd never left the UK and didn't have a passport. And one student took us up on that offer of having a passport. In terms of the civic engagement part, we, as I said, brought along the Chief Executive of Nottingham City Council on the trip with us. That allowed us to have great interactions and dialogue with the city halls and the mayors of both Karlsruhe and with Timisoara, not just for the Chief Executive and the academics, but also for the students. So they were hosted at the city halls in both cities. And then we held a showcase event in the city of Nottingham, inviting in our partners from Timisoara and Karlsruhe in May 2019, so that all the recommendations could be fed back to all three cities. And finally, in terms of the Brexit question, we recognised that as well as institutional links, we needed to create people-to-people link between our students and between our two cities in terms of academics and city leaders. So a few student outputs and outcomes for you. Did we achieve what we set out to achieve? Well, in terms of students from widening participation backgrounds, we just met that target of 50%. 53% were from WP backgrounds. You'll see there a photo on the right of students presenting their recommendations at the showcase event in Nottingham City Hall in May 2019. This group here is the winning poster presentation. There was also another group who presented a winning 2-minute pitch on how the City of Nottingham could adapt various smart and creative city initiatives they'd seen across the continent into Nottingham itself. The great news here was that the City Council was so impressed by these student recommendations that after this event they offered them 4 paid Smart City internships in the City Council. And for one of the students in the photo, the student in the middle in blue, we as a university were so impressed by her findings that we commissioned her to write a research report on enhancing equality, diversity and inclusion in study abroad at Nottingham Trent University. And if you have any questions for her, you can answer immediately after this because she's on the student panel. Her name is Rachel. And finally, back to those media students, as I said, we ended up with some great marketing collateral as we had 8 short films produced by them to be able to promote study abroad to our students and future students at NTU. I'm not going to dwell on the post-mobility survey results for too long because you'll see here we didn't have a particularly high response rate, and that's one thing we'd change next time, because once the students have gone, even they've had the experience of their life, it's hard to get them to fill in an online questionnaire. But for the 21 students who did take the time to complete this, you'll see that the findings are pretty much in line with the UUKi report around confidence, developing skills and enhancing employability. The one thing I'd like to pick out though is the fact that given this initiative took place 2 years ago, we now have the benefit of hindsight to see if the 100% of students who said they would definitely take on another study abroad with NTU did do so. And our findings show that 23% of undergraduate year 1 and 2 students did actually go on to do that. So that's 15 out of the 66 students, noting that final year students and master students would have found it more difficult to take on another study abroad opportunity. And of those 15 students, 11 of those were full year abroad and 4 of them were summer programs. And here's a quote from one of the student participants who did take the time to fill in our post-trip questionnaire. This is an undergraduate economics student, and you'll see that they found this probably the most exciting and unique opportunity that they would have at NTU. And you'll see there how they developed skills such as teamwork, problem solving, through the fact that they had the opportunity to network with other students, both from NTU and at the partner universities, but also business professionals in the places that we visited during our trip, and from Nottingham City Council. So in terms of institutional outputs and outcomes for us and for the city, we established new academic partnerships in both Karlsruhe and Timisoara, but also in the cities that the students and academics visited along the way. And we were able to include those in our Turing bid this summer. So one particular activity we're excited about is a new enterprise exchange with West University of Timisoara, who are our key partner in Timisoara for this challenge 2 years ago. We also developed a 5-year plan for the twin cities of Nottingham and Timisoara. The reason this was significant is we'd been twin cities for 10 years, nothing had ever happened. And following this trip, the two city leaders, the Mayor of Timisoara and the Chief Exec of Nottingham City Council, were inspired to create a plan that ensured that we would do meaningful activity in the next 5 years, and NTU is at the heart of that. It also gave us confidence through the train travel, despite the fact that few students reported it as being almost unbearable, in their exact words, to introduce sustainable travel scholarships. And these are for the purpose of allowing students to go to Europe to do sustainability projects, as well as to travel sustainably out to Europe as well. It also gave us the confidence to launch a WP program in Mexico. You'll see a photograph of that program over there. And this was for 20 students, and all 20 of them were from widening participation backgrounds. And finally, I had to mention COVID. We weren't able to do the challenge we'd planned for 2020. It had all been arranged, but COVID came in just as we were about to do it in April 2020. But we have been able, thanks to the relationships and partnerships we built in 2019, for a virtual exchange for 200 students, including our 3 partner cities in Europe, Karlsruhe, Timisoara, and Krasnodar in Russia. So finally, I'd like to leave you with a quote from our incoming Vice President Education in our Students' Union for next academic year. You'll have already seen her in this session because she was one of the students in the student video you saw ahead of the case study presentation. Her name is Kat Fagg. And again, you'll see here that we're delighted with the fact that the 2 short mobilities she did, which were the European Challenge, but also our Mexico service learning summer program, she feels definitely contributed and gave her the confidence to go on and take up the position of Vice President of Education in our Students' Union next year. So that's it from me. Thank you again to Universities UK, to the sponsors, British Council and Northern Consortium, and everybody else who's taken part in this session today, and everyone for joining us. Of course, especially Andra from West University of Timisoara, our key partner, is in the audience today. Now over to Emily for the student panel. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Stephen. And thanks also to Bob and Eduardo. They're really fantastic examples of short-term mobility. I think we all agree, and there's so much to think about in those presentations. So we're going to move swiftly on to the student panel now. So we're really pleased to have 3 students here today to talk to us about their experiences of short-term mobility. So we have Capri from Goldsmiths University, Rachel from Nottingham Trent University, and Mohammed from University of Westminster. And the panel will be chaired by Professor Alex Hughes, who's Deputy Vice Chancellor, Global Engagement and Employability at the University of Westminster. So I will let the panel commence.
Thanks very much, Emily. If I can invite our students to put their cameras on, please. It's no event of this kind would be complete without hearing from students who've actually done short-term outward mobility. So I'm really delighted to be chairing this session, and of course would like to thank all of the sponsors and all those engaged with the reports too. But let's move to the students. So could I ask each of the students to introduce themselves very briefly, and just to say a very few things about the mobility they did before we go on to probe that. So let's start with Mohammed, shall we?
Good evening, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mohammed, and I've recently just graduated from the University of Westminster with a degree in accounting. And yeah, during my first year, I was lucky enough to be selected as one of the 27 people out of about 200 applications to go on a short-term trip to Berlin in Germany. It was a wonderful trip because we really got to explore sort of the different environment within Germany, look at the different culture, which is quite different from London. And yeah, it was such a wonderful experience.
Brilliant, lovely to meet or re-meet you, actually, Mohammed. So you're one of our own. Right, Rachel, please introduce yourself and just say what kind of mobility or mobilities you did.
Hi, I'm Rachel Saunders. I'm currently a PhD candidate at the University of Nottingham and a recent graduate from Nottingham Trent University. I've done 4 mobility trips when I was at NTU. The first one was a trip through Scandinavia looking at professional development opportunities. The second trip was the Smart Cities Challenge that Stephen so eloquently discussed in his presentation. And my final 2 trips were to the US to look at various PhD opportunities as I was looking for ways to get onto a PhD at a US university.
Brilliant, thank you, Rachel. And finally, Caprice, please introduce yourself.
Oh yeah, of course. Hi everyone. Thank you for having me here to talk about my experience. And so I'm Caprice, and I was a previous student of Goldsmiths, University of London. And so I graduated in 2019, and I had studied BA Anthropology and Sociology. And so I had gone on a short-term mobility for 4 weeks to the West Bank in Palestine. I had done a teaching placement as an English conversation tutor, and I'll talk a bit more about it later. I have lots of interesting things to say about it, to be honest. And also the political climate at the moment, it's proven to be very relevant in the conversation around human rights.
Fantastic, lovely. Right, let's get into some kinds of mini articulations of the benefits and the impact of short-term outward mobility. So, Mohammed, again, starting with you, what's your key takeaway from the short-term mobility experience that you had, and what was the value and impact of it for you?
I think for me, there was quite a lot to take away from this trip. I think first of all, the most important part for me was the fact that as soon as I came back from this trip, I realized that I was all of a sudden a lot more confident in everything that I was doing. So I picked up, various different skills. So, whether it's communication or just having, confidence in general. I just saw that when I was back, I was all of a sudden, I wasn't shy, I wasn't timid. And as a lot of my friends would complain, I was just talking way too much. So from this trip, essentially, I got quite a bit of confidence, which I translated not only into my personal life, but also into my professional life. Besides that, I think going onto this trip, because it was a variety of students from all different courses from across the university, I really got to network with a lot of the students. So I really got to meet students from all of the other campuses. Normally, I would stick to my campus, but because of this trip, I was really able to know people from across different campuses. And it wasn't just for the trip itself. I'm still very good friends with a lot of these people today. In fact, just this morning, one of my friends actually messaged me this morning that 2 years ago we were in Berlin, and this is a picture from it. So I'm in touch with these people still, and yeah, I've made great friends with them. I think besides that, this trip really had a massive impact on my employability because having put this on my CV, it became a really big talking point. So whenever I was having interviews, this was always being picked upon by the interviewer, and it just became a really good talking point because having this international experience on my CV really put me apart from the rest of the candidates. And I feel lucky that because of this experience, I think this has contributed massively to me being able to secure a graduate role, which I really look forward to starting in September.
Well, that's really good to hear, and congratulations on your new role as well. That's excellent.
Thanks so much.
So, Rachel, what about your own experience of short-term outward mobility? What kind of came out of that for you as the key benefit of this particular kind of international experience?
Basically, I managed to land a PhD and also a fellowship. At the moment, I'm, as I said, I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Nottingham, and my application process for that was, I learned a lot when I looked at the US universities and the application process for that. And one of the key takeaways I had when I talked to staff over in the US was about finding my own groove and finding my own space. And it's very interesting now. I am a PhD candidate and I've been doing the role for a year. It's like I've drawn a lot on those experiences. And when I came to apply for the fellowship that I started in April, one of the key benefits from doing the piece of research I did with NTU Global is it gave me the confidence that I could be a professional researcher, and also seeing the kind of work environments where research is cultivated, and it allowed me, especially with the international experiences, it allowed me to have an outlook that drew upon those WP experiences that I have myself. So I've brought a lot of diversity and a lot of from being othered within other cultures. It's like bringing those sort of worldviews and those sort of mindsets into the work I'm doing at the moment.
Thank you very much. And again, congratulations on the new phase of your trajectory on your PhD studies. Always an exciting moment. And I'm sure that the international experience, as you said, was absolutely critical to orienting that. So Caprice, how about you? What was the sort of lasting benefit and impact for you of the quite remarkable international experience you had?
Yes, yeah. Well, actually, I would like to take it slightly a step back. So in my third year, just before I left, and so I had chosen to write my research project on conceptualizing the international student, so Eastern students seeking Western educations. And from this, I realized that there was a kind of education hierarchy, in the international education field. And I started to think, what are the reasons for this, and what are Eastern institutions like in comparison to Western institutions? So this is how I did end up choosing to go to Palestine when I saw the opportunity offered by An-Najah University. And so yeah, from there, Palestine also proved to be quite an interesting choice simply because of the political climate, as I'd mentioned. And for me, I suppose the lasting impacts were pretty much that now I am studying a master's at Birkbeck University in human rights law. And so I soon realized on my placement that, the students studying over there, they are choosing to study English in their own free time on a non-credit basis, may I add, just to broaden their opportunities and also allow accessibility to the global jobs market. And so this was a really important factor for them, that they could, speak English to a conversational level at least, to be able to open these doors for themselves. Another thing I saw was that they don't actually have much opportunity to mix with international students. So not only was it very impactful for me myself going there on a placement, it was also very beneficial for the students I was working with. A lot of them unfortunately don't have opportunities to travel at all. And then, not even really down to Jerusalem, which is around 40 minutes down the road due to the occupation. So this was really eye-opening for me, and that's what led me to my master's. And thankfully, from there, I had also been applying for jobs, being a recent graduate, and a recent interview I done, that was in November last year, was with the Cabinet Office, and I'm very, very grateful to have succeeded in the interview process and gained an entry place working with the GDS. And so in my interview, they had asked us to provide a presentation on something we're passionate about, which, is very broad. And it's like, I could talk about my love for yoga, or, how much I love to eat sushi or something. But actually, I thought this is a great opportunity to talk about something that, I've had this incredible experience with, and I can carry forward in my career. And so I done a 2-minute presentation on my experience in Palestine. And I really think that helped me stand out from the other applicants, and was a big aspect of what helped me secure the role in the Cabinet Office. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think that if anyone in the audience was in any doubt about the benefits of short-term outward mobility, our 3 student speakers in those very short presentations have really shone a very clear spotlight on some very, very key things that STOM introduces. The intensive enhancement of skills that are really critical both for study and for the world of work subsequently. Confidence, communication skills, self-starting skills, that emerged very strongly. And the value of these kinds of experiences in preparing our students and our recent graduates for further study and for entry into the world of graduate employment as well came out incredibly strongly from those presentations. So thanks, guys. That was absolutely brilliant to hear. I've got some further questions, which I will direct either at all of you or some of you, depending on what they are in our remaining time. A first question for everyone. Was finance a challenge, and did you receive financial help from your institutions? Because this is a theme in the report. I don't know who'd like to start on that one.
Yeah,
Rachel?
go on, Rachel.
Go ahead, Rachel.
I'm happy to start this one. Basically, it was a mixture of both. NTU provided me with 3 bursaries to help me travel over the 3 years that I did the travel that I did, the mobility I did. But I also had, I self-funded quite a lot of it. And because they were all self-initiated on my own behalf, I was able to scope and cost out everything. And that was part of the challenge, is to make sure that I stayed within the budget that I'd set for myself.
Okay, thank you. So that's the kind of mixed model there. Mohammed, you also answered. Well, how about you?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, as someone who comes from a lower earning background and someone who's from an underrepresented background, I think finance was quite a big challenge for me. So when I was told that, the trip was fully funded, I was really eager to go, because it's an opportunity which I never really had before. So having had this opportunity, it really allowed me to really go out of my nutshell and really explore Germany and explore different culture, different environment. And overall, I think it really did bring out the best within me.
Thank you very much. How about you, Caprice?
Yes. So I was supported financially, both via Goldsmiths, Global Opportunities. Thank you, Ed. He had mentioned earlier about the Santander bursary that was available. So I had applied to that and was successful in gaining the bursary to help me pay for the trip, and also through An Najah University. So in exchange for my time teaching with them, they were able to provide accommodation for me. And so both of these aspects were really huge in helping me go on my placement. I wouldn't have been able to do it without the support.
Thank you very much. So I think we're hearing very clearly from our students that support for short-term outward mobility is critical, whether it's institutional, whether it's through sponsors, charities, or whether it's through tutoring. And I think we're also hearing very strongly from our student contributors that this is particularly critical for students from underrepresented groups, from non-traditional backgrounds, from lower income groups, and so forth. It's something we know, but it's really good to hear you all kind of endorse that point. So a kind of related question, really. For the three of you, and I think we'll start with Caprice this time, what's the value of short-term outward mobility over more standard longer-term mobility, and what are the barriers to taking up that longer-term semester or year abroad type mobility? What do you think about that one?
Well, I think to begin with, so my chosen destination, of course, would have been very difficult to travel to for more than a short-term placement, just not only because of the political aspect to it, but the ability to find a university to partner with over there that are willing to take on international students in the circumstances that they're living in. So that was firstly for me, but also I think it is definitely about accessibility. A lot of my colleagues at university would say that they didn't want to go on longer term placements because they thought it would disrupt the flow of their studies, and also they weren't quite confident in leaving home for maybe 6 months or a year. And so I think that is one of the main benefits for the short-term mobility.
Yeah, it's interesting. This confidence theme keeps coming up, doesn't it? Confidence or lack of confidence lies behind the short-term mobility choice, and then the short-term mobility choice is hugely enhancing in terms of confidence. So it's kind of interesting theme there. Rachel, what do you think about this? What's your sense of the value of STOM, as we call it at Westminster, rather than something longer term?
My course was a foundation degree. The first course at Trent was a foundation degree, so there was a hard block on me doing a year-long or even a semester-long study abroad program. And so the benefit of the short-term mobility was both the flexibility and also the ability to self-direct myself, because I could target exactly where I wanted to go with the funding that was available to me. There were no within the bounds of my course. It had to relate at least some way to the course I was taking, but there were no bounds otherwise. So I was free to scope it. And I think the biggest benefit, if you're a WP student in particular, is that some of the other options, especially if you're staying somewhere for a longer period of time, you're dependent on having financing behind you to be able to do that. And even some of the longer term mobility options, where you've got to have enough money to be able to afford to stay and eat, etc. And being able to do a short term mobility that suited me was probably the biggest benefit of doing it. But also a secondary benefit was being able to be very focused, and there was no real room for gaps in what I was doing. I had to be very focused and very concentrated, and the time I had abroad was used to maximize what opportunities were available, rather than having downtime. It was a very short, sharp, concentrated period where I tried to maximize every day that I was out there.
Thanks, that's excellent. So the sort of benefits of intensity and also flexibility as well were very important to you. And how about you, Mohammed? What about what are your thoughts on the kind of impacts and benefits of short term rather than longer term?
I think besides the financial aspect of it, the fact that obviously if it's long term, it's going to be a lot of funding necessary for it. I think the confidence again plays a big role here, because I don't think personally I'd be confident in living away from home for such a long time, without missing home too much. So I think that's a big factor, and being someone who really has sort of a career planned out, I don't think this massive disruption of taking a whole year abroad or taking a whole year out would really fit into my career goals. So that is why I preferred short term over long term.
Excellent, thank you. So some very varied but complementary answers there from our three students. That's fantastic. Right, another question from me to all of you, and I'm sure that lots of people in the audience who've got roles similar to mine in universities will want to ask you guys this. What more can we do to embed short-term outward mobility into university strategy and to extend access to students from disadvantaged groups? Because there's a really strong link between short-term outward mobility, inequality, diversity and inclusion issues. So what more can PVC internationals, DVCs like me, outward mobility teams do to really kind of embed short-term outward mobility? And I'm going to start with Rachel this time.
That was the whole focus of my report that I wrote for NTU Global.
I know, that's what I'm starting.
Basically, one of the critical things for me that came out of all of this is you've got to start with the university targeting the marketing at the right people, because it's not just about the students, it's about academics, and it's about having imagination. Because often with short-term mobility, it's not just about going and putting somebody in an academic environment, it's about the othering process and about encouraging both academics and students to think imaginatively about how study abroad programs can benefit students. And often if you're a WP student or you're a carer or you're somebody like myself who's an older student who potentially hasn't had the opportunities in the past, it's that leap of imagination and also being enabled and facilitated by the team behind them to actually go ahead and do it. Because often if you're doing a course like nursing or a practical course, those sort of study abroad opportunities might not seem directly tied in with the course you're doing. However, as with the case at NTU Global, as long as it's related to the course, you can then take those opportunities up. So I think my biggest takeaway would be leap of imagination and having the staff, the imagination within the staff as well to see what opportunities short-term mobility can offer. And then also having strong facilities behind that to ensure that any student who wishes to do short-term mobility has got the ability to do it.
That's really helpful, thank you, and a very comprehensive answer. Over to you next, Mohammed. What else can we be doing within university strategy and practice to really embed short-term outward mobility?
I think I'm just going to really echo Rachel's point here, which is basically trying to target the right people. From my experience, what I felt was when I spoke to a lot of my friends about this trip, before going to the trip and also after coming back, a lot of them did not seem to know, the application process for the trip and the fact that, the trip was running. So I feel like if we target students specifically, especially those who are from those low earning backgrounds or those from underrepresented groups, if we target them specifically to say, look, these are opportunities available for you. These are the benefits which you can obtain from going onto these opportunities and trips. I think that could really, bring them into the game as well.
And presumably part of that is using students who've already done the kind of trips to message. I know that, I say this partly because I know you've been absolutely brilliant in engaging with students following along behind you to sell the benefits of the kind of mobility you did. And that's really kind of key to messaging, I think. And thank you ever so much for that. It's much appreciated. Right, Caprice, what else can universities be doing to really kind of mainstream this?
Yes, I mean, again, I was going to say that like what you've just said. So I think it's really valuable when students that have previously been abroad and had positive and maybe more challenging experiences can come forward and discuss the time that they did spend abroad and the takeaways that they've had. I think there's real value in talking to someone real life and that has been through it and understands what the students are possibly feeling or their concerns and worries. I know that, again, from talking to my peers at university, a lot of their concerns were also around the feeling of, you know, not being comfortable, not being at home, and stepping outside of their comfort zone. And I think it's really important to promote the fact that stepping outside of your comfort zone only expands your horizons, you know, and it gives you far more opportunities to grasp onto. So yeah, it's very difficult though, I think. I don't think it's an easy task at all, especially because of the culture around you know, study abroad placements. It does tend to be the same students that go for the opportunities. I know I'm one of those. Whenever I see an opportunity, I jump at it. But yeah, it really is about getting the message to those students that may not really see themselves as the type of student to step out of the comfort zone.
Thank you very much for that. And actually, that takes me on to my final question for you guys, which you kind of answered, Caprice, in answering the last one. So I'm going to go to Rachel and then Mohammed for a final contribution from you guys. And that's about your own sense of the benefit of something you've both mentioned, which is stepping out of your cultural comfort zone. Just tell us a little bit about what that felt like for you and why it was important, because Caprice has introduced the topic, and we've talked about this before. Rachel, what was that like for you, and why was it so beneficial?
I mean, I mentioned it in the blog as well, that UUKi asked me to do, and I call it the othering process, where basically you're directly implanted, you implant yourself into another culture. And as a British white person, you're used to being the majority. You're the person who speaks English, has a ton of privilege that goes with being an English person in England. And as soon as you're put in, even if you go to France or Germany, you get a small degree of othering. But if you go further afield, like places like Thailand or Hong Kong, where you are directly a global minority. And I think as one of the things that I'm really keen to emphasize about travel abroad and study abroad in general is even having a short experience of being othered is such a life-changing and life-affirming way, because you suddenly realize that you're not just this majority person in your own environment. You are a part of this collective whole, and it's a very, I don't know if anybody else has experienced it, but as soon as you step off the train, like in Paris, for instance, there's no English, and you're forced into this environment where you have to orientate yourself to the local culture on their own terms. And it means that you're not, it gets you out of your mindset. And I think ever since I took my first trip abroad, it was very much this case of seeing the other for what it is, which is something quite beautiful and quite refreshing. I'm an inveterate traveller, so I absolutely adore travelling, and it's just one of those things that every time I go abroad, and especially on the short-term military trips we did, like when we went to Timisoara, Romania, for all its Europeanness, is still very distinctly Romanian. There's still this cultural otherness that, if you embrace it and you accept it for what it is very, very affirming.
Thank you. That's very interesting, and it's probably even more important these days to encounter otherness and the experience of being othered in contexts where kind of cultural barriers and boundaries are coming up very strongly right across the world, including arguably in this one, she said tactfully. Mohammed, how about you? You know, you talked about that feeling of being outside your nutshell. Why was that a kind of benefit for you, would you say?
I think what I realized was from this trip was the fact that there is a whole world beyond just London. So obviously I was used to growing up in London, seeing London here and there, everywhere. So really getting to go to Germany really opened my eyes to so many new things. So, you know, as I mentioned about the confidence thing, it really did boost my confidence. But along with that, it showed me about all the virtual different positions and sort of places I can go to, whether it's academic or whether it's professional. So, for example, one of the wonderful things we did there when we were led by the wonderful Alyssa Martin, who's also in audience today, was the fact that we got to meet with alumni students from Westminster University who actually now live in Berlin. They work in Berlin. They've got their own businesses. So really getting to know them, getting to go to their businesses, exploring their businesses, and really looking at the challenges, you know, from university to actually moving down into Germany, just opening up their businesses, what challenges they faced, you know, how they got to where they are now. this was really inspirational, and I think from being able to actually visit a lot of different universities, partner universities in Germany as well, it was beneficial for me because, you know, I had thought of myself to actually stay in London because I am thinking of pursuing a master's degree as well after a few years of experience. But having gone to this trip, you know, it's really opened my eyes that there are, you know, a lot more universities in Europe, which I think would be a lot better for me.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, there's this current recurrent theme about further study, which is absolutely brilliant to hear. Right, it was really great to hear from Caprice. Sorry, please do.
Just a final piece, and it's in relation to both what Mohammed and Rachel have said, and off the back of othering. And I wanted to just reiterate the fact that when a student does step outside of their comfort zone into a new environment, you know, this just contributes to the idea of acceptance and an understanding of cross-cultural relations. And I think so. My master's research project is actually on whether violence is a necessary component to reach social change and then peace. And I think actually a lot of people believe that violence is human nature and innate, but actually education is a direct challenge to that. And within education, social mobility, where if more students were possibly stepping outside of their comfort zone and traveling to areas of the world that, you know, they were othered, and then they could understand how it feels to be othered. When they do come back to England, they'll have a new attitude towards issues like Brexit, issues like the refugee crisis. And this is all part of building on that understanding and acceptance. Thank you.
Thank you. And that is a hugely powerful point, and what you've just articulated there says in a nutshell why it is so important for this country for the United Kingdom to keep on supporting outward mobility, to keep on lobbying for outward mobility in all its forms, because at a cultural moment where boundaries, borders and barriers are stronger arguably than they have been in many decades, the crossing of them and supporting young people to cross them is such an important project. So Emily, I think we're inviting all our speakers now to be part of the wrap-up panel, our students and the colleagues who spoke before them. And I think that you are going to pose some of the questions that have emerged in the chat. So I'm going to hand over to you, Emily.
That's right. Thanks very much, Alex, and thanks very much to Rachel, Caprice and Mohammed. There are some really fantastic comments in the chat for you students. People have really enjoyed your perceptions and insights and your experiences. So thank you very much for sharing those. I'm going to go back to there's been a couple of questions which people put in the chat after our university presenters. So we should have a chance to pose those questions. So I think there's one for Eduardo, which was around, I've lost the question again now. Yes. So Eduardo, how do you decide on students applying to these programs? What is the criteria for a student to be successful in this?
And big thank you to the panelists. So that was amazing, that session. Lots of scribbling down here. We all students apply through an online application form, and they have to put answered like 3 or 4 questions, so kind of motivational statements, how it's going to benefit them, the skills and experience they're going to gain, and how it will impact their future career and education, and kind of questions like that. And then we have a regular panel that meets and reviews the applications. Students have to be kind of not failing academically as well. I think that's about it. It's kind of around that. Where there's more competition, we then rank students in order of their application, basically.
Okay, and while I'm with you, Eduardo, there's another question around managing students' expectations, particularly in the summer, if they may have to do resits. And I know this is a difficult one, and I don't know if you have any advice for people around that.
We generally, hopefully there's this, because it's short-term mobility, they can fit around. I mean, we say to students, they find their own placements, they select their own dates. We don't check whether they have resits in particular. It would just be if they've got really poor attendance or if they're kind of going to fail. But that wouldn't be a barrier for us. I guess it's also because the students can fit them around those exams.
Great, thank you. And I think a question here for Stephen. around how you measure sort of the impact on students, particularly the academic side, with the short-term mobility that you've been running from NTU. And along with that, you know, how do you get students to complete surveys after they've graduated, which again, I think is something we could all do with knowing how to do.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. So I guess on the academic side, it's very simple. We just track performance and attendance, so to see if those increase, so if their levels of engagement increase post the mobility trip. I mean, in reality, the main ones that run out of my office, NTU Global, are kind of tend to have a slightly different focus. So the one I presented there was around civic engagement and kind of, I guess, introducing students to the concept of smart cities. The Mexico trip we did was all around community engagement. So we ran a service learning program where the students were sent out into rural Mexico to work with indigenous communities. So those were the, I guess, those are the things we were trying to measure on those trips. But I guess the points we've learned from the report is that even though these aren't directly course related, there are clear academic benefits to the students. And I guess Rachel's testament to that with the research project that led into her being accepted onto a PhD at the University of Nottingham. I guess in terms of the survey question, I guess our simple answer, which we put in place for the Mexico short mobility that followed in July after the European mobility in April, because we clearly recognised we hadn't got a good response rate, was we gave the students a good old-fashioned paper form on the coach from Cetis University in Ensenada to San Diego Airport. It's quite a long journey if anyone's ever been through the US border around by Tijuana, so there was plenty of time for them to complete it physically and hand them in, and that way, surprise, surprise, we had 100% completion rate of that particular post-mobility survey. I guess the disadvantage is that, you know, they haven't had time to reflect. It is happening literally as they leave the country. So maybe if you can find a way of giving them a short period of reflection after the trip just to compose their thoughts, I think that would be the ideal, assuming you can still get a high response rate when you've let them go out of your site.
Great, thank you, Stephen. So we have another question, I think, for university colleagues, which is really how you do manage to get buy-in from senior management to put resources into supporting outward mobility. So Bob, I wonder if you'd like to have a go at that one.
I think the first thing is making them aware of the wider benefits. So it's not just the benefits for the students that are actually participating in it, but it's the benefits for the staff. And it's also clearly linking in, aligning to the university's goals and targets or KPIs. So if you can illustrate that quite succinctly to the senior management, they're going to be much more keen to support you in taking these events forward.
Will either Eduardo or Stephen want to add to that?
Yeah, I guess it's just about continually highlighting the impact, kind of what Bob said really, but I mean, highlighting the impact, sharing case studies, getting students to speak to management, senior management as well. We've kind of built out from very small pilots. I think having Erasmus funding and having Santander University's funding helps as well, because it just shows that that's you kind of have it increases that funding pool. That makes sense.
Great. Okay, and I think as we still have our students with us, we've got a question that's come in around managing the climate crisis, and I think it'd be good to address students with that, because I also feel that when students meet other students in different countries, they also get an insight into what other students are doing around the world to manage the climate crisis as well. So perhaps, Rachel, would you be able to give some consideration to how universities can sort of tick that box at the same time as giving students these experiences?
I would say this is a complicated one, because on the one hand, if you want to truly other people, potentially you have to go outside of Europe, and obviously that involves flying if you want to do really short-term mobility. So there has to be a balance, potentially using carbon offsetting or some other techniques that universities can do to do outside of Europe mobility. However, if you're doing inside of Europe mobility, using trains is an absolutely perfect way of doing it. And I think that's one of the great things that Smart Cities Challenge showed, is that, yes, it can be a bit frustrating if you're doing an overnight train from Cologne to Munich and it's an ICE with absolute air condition blasting everywhere. However, when you're sending 100 students across Europe and everyone is getting something from it and it is a sustainable trip, it shows the potential of doing that. And in terms of getting other students reflexivity, like going to Berlin, I'm sure that Mohammed will be able to answer this as well, but Berlin and Vienna and a lot of the Central European cities have built sustainability from the ground up within their infrastructure. And you can clearly see the difference between British cities and European cities and how they're applying sustainability. So I don't think it's just in terms of what British universities can do for sustainability. I think it's more of a collective mindset. And with the change over to the Turing scheme and potentially with the changes to the Horizon, I think there's going to be some scope for doing some really interesting projects between universities that you can really embed sustainability into those.
Great. Well, thank you very much for that, Rachel. I don't know if Mohammed or Caprice would like to add anything else around their views on this topic.
I mean, I
think sorry, go on.
I was just going to say Rachel's done a fantastic job, I think, of covering it, but she's right in saying that we need to embed it from the foundation of the projects that students will be going on. And also, I'm not sure, Eduardo, maybe Goldsmiths had offered financial incentives, I'm sure, at one point for students that were willing to change the way in which they would travel to their chosen location. So I think that also might be quite a good idea, potentially.
Yeah, just to jump in, we introduced a kind of green fund basically for students. We can't fund all students in that way, but they could apply for a top up to their funding if they showed they were going to travel not by plane. Basically, slightly tricky at the moment because I don't know how to support them to go across Europe by train through lots of different countries with coronavirus. But yeah, that's the plan for the future.
Great. Well, I think we are out of time now. So thanks very much again for the panel, for the students, and it's great for the presenters as well to be able to answer a few questions from the participants. So I'm going to hand over to Celia now to wrap the event up.
Thanks, Emily, and thanks to the students just now for the panel. I really thought that was an absolutely fabulous session. So just to wrap up now, because we've only got a minute or two left, to let you all know that we'll be sharing all the presentations with participants from today, and we'll make the YouTube recording available of this session, and also we'll make sure that people have access to the 2-minute video that we shared earlier as well. That's all in the chat as well, but you'll be getting an email with all those details separately. Just want to take a final moment to thank our funders, the Northern Consortium and the British Council, for their excellent support for this project throughout, to our fantastic speakers and our amazing students for the session today, to Alex for chairing, to you all for attending, and thank you for being part of this and making it an event with all your questions, and a particular thanks to Emily as well, who's done an amazing job, and our external affairs team in putting the report together and bringing today's event together. So thank you very much for everybody. I would encourage you to go away, have a read of the report, share feedback with us, let us know what you think, and we hope that you will continue to find this useful as you develop your own programmes and strategies as we move forward. Thanks very much to everyone, and have a good rest of day.